Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel here at Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com. This time out on another episode of Inside the Mix, we're going to take a look at a mix breakdown of another song by Brandon Van Allen. This song is called One Lone Satellite. Now we did a mix breakdown of his first song, Let the Singing Do the Talking, I don't know, a couple of months ago. You may want to check that out if you haven't seen it already. Link will be in the description box below. This time we're going to do a mix breakdown of his second EP. I just got through mixing it. Brandon signed off the mix this morning. So before I pull it off the console and get ready for the next project, I thought we'd walk through and give you kind of a look-see and a listen-see to what is going on here. So that's what we're going to do today. Again, we have more episodes of Inside the Mix on a playlist. Link will be in the description box below. Before we get to this mix, if you like what you see in the video, please consider subscribing. Also, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming music. Also, if this channel helps you in any way, be sure to hit the thanks button below this video. It really does help me, and I appreciate you doing so. Last but not least, go out to mixingmusicanalog.com, check out what I have going on over there, and coming up in the beginning of 2023, depending on when you're watching this video, we are going to have some mixing training courses available for the analog hybrid mixing workflow. So if you're interested in learning how to mix with outboard gear and want to do a full mix from start to finish with good old Uncle Dave here, check out mixingmusicanalog.com. There'll be a page for training courses or mixing courses. Check that out and see when the latest course is coming to a theater near you. So let's talk about this song by Brandon Van Allen. Oh, and by the way, shout out to Brandon for allowing us to use this song again here on YouTube. Make sure you check out his links in the description box below. He's an awesome singer, songwriter, producer, instructor. Check out his website. All the links will be in the description box below. If you're in the market for singing lessons, keyboard lessons, bass lessons, guitar lessons, songwriting lessons, and so much more, Brandon is a really good guy. Really cool cat. You may want to check out what he has going on. And thank you so very much, Brandon, for allowing us to use your song here on the channel. Hopefully it'll help others and you'll go out and check out some of Brandon's music and show him some love. So One Lone Satellite. Again, part of his EP, same EP that'll have the first song we did, Let the Singing Do the Talking. It's kind of a pop rock tune, really cool song. This song has a little bit more involved in it than the first one that we did about a month or so ago. So let's talk about what we have going on in this session. So the first thing I want to do is come over here in the Studio One. Let's play back maybe the first verse and chorus of this song so you could hear the final mix and what Brandon signed off on and what he enjoyed. And we're going to listen to that right now. That's in this track here in yellow. We'll listen to that and then I'll come down, I'll take you through the session, show you the layout on the console, and kind of give you an overview on kind of how I went about putting this mix together for Brandon. So here is One Lone Satellite by Brandon Van Allen. Enjoy. Okay, so there is One Lone Satellite. Great tune, great catchy little number. Again, check out Brandon's music. His link will be in the description box below if you want to check out the rest of his music and check out this song and all the other songs he's got. There'll be information on his website, so you'll know how to get a hold of that. I think it'll be on Spotify, Apple Music, and all of that stuff. Anyhow, let's take a look at the breakdown of this session. So I'm going to, just gonna mute this track here. Or actually, I'll just mute the event here. Okay, we can unmute that. We shouldn't hear anything. Yes, we won't hear anything, great. Okay, good. And now, let's see, if I play this back here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at the layout of this song. So, again, this is a mixture of software instruments, real instruments. Brandon does all the programming of drums and all the string sections and all the MIDI instruments, as well as plays the guitars live and does all the singing as well. So he's a one-man show for sure. If we look at the top of the session here, we have all our drums in brown. We have a kick sample, which I added. The kick was just here. I duplicated it, put a sample on it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Snare in the snare sample, same thing. I added a second track, duplicated the snare, added a sample. Hi-hats, 4 tom tracks, a filtered kit, which is kind of like a sound effect thing, which I'll play for you in a bit, that happens in the bridge. We have some overheads, some rooms. Again, all this comes out of Steven Slate SSD5, I believe. We have a bass guitar, which I believe he played, and then I believe he uses Easy Bass by Tune Tracks for the actual bass sounds. And then we have some acoustic guitars here, which are all played by Brandon. We have an acoustic strumming in the choruses. We have one of the main kind of little hooks of the song, the picked sound, which again, I'll solo up in a bit. We have another acoustic sound called the Big Dripper, which we'll talk about later. Then we have some heavy guitar tracks. We have a guitar left and right. We have a guitar synth patch, a heavy guitar for the choruses, and then a palm muted guitar in the verses. And that's the instrumentation for the most part, although we have some more down here. Then we have some lead vocal tracks. So in red, here's our lead vocals. We have the original dry vocal, which I didn't use. I actually turned down the fader here in Studio One. Because the next track is a lead vocal effects. All the effects you hear, reverb and delay, was all done by Brandon, is what he really liked. He gave this to me as kind of, this is the sound that he really wanted. He wanted me to try to kind of replicate that on his dry vocal. But I just thought it sounded great. It was the proper amount of reverb for this song. It sounded really good. He really liked it, so I just used it. Why try recreating the wheel? He already enjoyed it, so we're gonna keep it. Then we have a lead vocal 2. We have some overlaps and some overdubs here, a couple other tracks, background vocals, 2 of those. We have an ad-lib track at the end where he's doing a little bit of ad-libs. Then we have an organ track. We have a keyboard track here as well, a shaker, a tambourine, a bells track, and then we have a stereo track of some sound effects he has going on during the song. Again, he programmed all of that, and all I did was feathered that in. So that's the way it worked out. So this took, on the console, 32, 4, 6, 38 faders. So we're using all 32 long faders, and then on the short faders we're using for the amplified keys, the keyboard track, the shaker, the tambourine, the bells, and then the stereo left and right effects there. So we have 38 tracks that we're using for this session. So a little bit bigger than the last section. So let's start off with kind of what we did here. So on the console, we have all our drums down here, all the way up to channel 14. All that's being routed down to a drum bus. On that drum bus, we're using the NG bus compressor by Wes Audio, which is pretty much my standard go-to. And then from there to the stereo API 5500 EQ, which is again, kind of my standard. Let's talk about the master bus overall. So the whole mix is going through the SSL Fusion, which I'm sure you'll see come up on the screen. It'll kind of show you the settings. It's kind of a standard setting there. We're using the vintage drive. We're using a little bit of stereo width, about 3 dB at 30 Hertz on the low end on the EQ. I think 2 or 3 dB at 16K on the top, so a little bit of bottom, a little bit of top. And then from there, we're going to the SSL bus compressor here. We're doing about 2-to-1 ratio. We're doing about 4 dB of compression with an auto release. Pretty standard stuff. For me anyway, that's kind of the starting point of what we're kind of doing here. So back to the drum bus. So let's go to the drums. Let's just listen to what the drums kind of sound like here. I'll kind of give you a verse section here. So here is the processed drums. Let's see. Oh, we got to go down here to the mix, sorry. Let's listen to that. So we're gonna kind of solo these up here for you. So here's kind of our finished drum sound. Let me try this. Okay, so there's our final drum sound. So again, the only thing that I added to Brandon's original session was the kick and the snare sample. So I'll show you that here in Studio One. And I do this a lot on a lot of my mixes. I'll almost always duplicate the kick, duplicate the snare, and add samples and blend them in. Now sometimes I don't need to use those samples, but when I'm doing my session setup, they're always there. So on the kick, we're using trigger 2. Kind of a real low, kind of a sub kick, and that's kind of what I wanted. And I took a lot of the high end out on this as well and really kind of boosted the low end to use it kind of as a sub, because the original kick was more of the top end slap and I wanted to add a kind of a low end. So that's what we have there. And on our snare, again, I duplicated the track, and on the snare, we're using a Ludwig Black Beauty as our snare sample. And the thing that I do on this is I detune this sample -3. So it's a little bit lower in pitch, so it blends nice with the original snares. So our kick and snare, if I were to just hit all these buttons here, here's our kick snare. And if I take away the 2 samples, here's just the original kick and snare. Which sounds fine on its own, but in the track it needed to be more. So by adding the kick sample and the snare sample, here's what we have. So it adds a little bit more bottom end and meat to that snare by using the sample and detuning it. It gives it a little bit more overall body, and then the kick drum obviously has a lot more girth underneath and just gives and provides a little bit more weight. The rest of the drums came right out of Steven Slate SSD5. I just did some basic, run-of-the-mill EQ, nothing special. And then again, I used the NG bus compressor on the drum bus here, which I'll bring up here in Studio One. So let me bring back all the drums here so you can see this. Okay, so on the NG bus compressor, we're doing a 1.5:1 ratio, real short ratio. We're doing a pretty slow attack. We're doing a pretty quick release, and we're side chaining at 60 Hertz, so the real low end is not affecting the compressor. I'm using a good portion of the total harmonic distortion circuit in the West Audio NG bus compressor, as well as the transformer circuit. So I'll just bypass it, I'll take it in and out, so here's with it. So you can really hear it elongate the kick a little bit. The snare has a little bit more presence to it, as well as the sustain of it's a little bit more, and you can hear a little bit more of the rooms in the overhead. So just kind of gluing it together, tightening it up, adding a little bit of saturation here. From there, we're going to the API 5500 EQ. And again, my standard settings for the most part is at 50 Hertz, we're boosting a couple of dB. We're taking about 2 dB out around 500. We're adding a little bit at 5K, 2 or 3 dB, and then I don't think we're doing anything on the top end. So what I'll do is I'll play it back with the EQ and with the bus compressor, and then I'll bypass the bus compressor, wheel over to the chair, and bypass the EQ. So you can hear what the cumulative effect is of the bus compressor with the EQ on the drum bus. Here we go. So it just gives it a little bit more power, a little bit more weight, which really helps because there's a lot of instrumentation going on to really help it stand up tall in the mix. So that's what we're doing on the drums. Next up is we have our bass, and our bass is going through, from a compression point of view, the LA2A, or the opto compressor by Wes Audio. So here's our bass when we bring that in. And on that bass, on the opto compressor LA2A, we're only compressing about 3-4 dB. It's not bad at all because he had a little bit of compression going on in recording. So it sounded really good on its own. It's up in the mix quite a bit because that's what he kind of wanted. Added some low end also in the EQ to kind of really beef it up a little bit. And that's about it. Just added a really good amount of low end at around, I don't know, what does it look like? Around 70, 80 hertz, somewhere in that ballpark. Bass, pretty straightforward. Okay, good little groove. Then we have two sets of acoustic guitars. We have one that's an acoustic strum, which really just happens in the chorus sections. So that'll be here. And from a compression point of view, I believe that is running through the SSL 611 Dynamics in the 500 series rack. And we're compressing about, I think about 6 dB on this. Let me just take a look at that. Yeah, about 6, and it kind of pokes up almost to 10 dB on its heaviest hits. And just kind of blending that in again, that's a live acoustic being played. We're adding quite a bit of shine here at about maybe 5K, about 6 dB. We're doing a little bit of a low cut filter there at around 90 hertz or so, 100 hertz, just so it blends nice and doesn't get too muddy or boomy. Now the next set of acoustics is called the acoustic guitar picked. This is kind of one of the main kind of, hooks of the song, if you will. So if I were to, let me get rid of all of this and just solo these up for you. And that's what starts off the song. The intro of the song is what you hear is that. So on those, we're just cleaning them up with some EQ. We are using the Wes Audio Dione VCA compressor just to kind of compress it a little bit, just to kind of keep it in line, but it's a very minimal amount of compression. Maybe 3 or 4 dB, that's it. So that's the kind of one of the main parts of the song. After that, we have this track that happens in the pre-chorus and in the or in the second verse and in the pre-chorus and the chorus is this thing called the big drip. Kind of plays along with this acoustic sound. Here it goes. I'll let you lead into it so you could hear it here. Here we go. So musically in the verses, that is kind of the theme, and that has no compression on it, no nothing, just a little bit of top end EQ, pulled out a little bit of mid-range on that and just kind of blended it in, and that's all we really did there. There was nothing else really going on there. Our next set of guitar tracks, we have a couple of guitar kind of slightly distorted and broken up guitars left and right here, so if we bring those in along with it. So those two heavy guitars have no compression on them at all. They're already compressed. It's recorded really, really well. I'm not sure if that's an electric guitar amp or if he's playing that and has a simulated VST. I believe it's a VST, like Guitar Rig or Amplitude or one of those, but it sounds great. It kind of sounds like a lightly broken up kind of a Marshall kind of a deal, just adding some texture. In the end of the, in the second verse here, we have the next guitar track, which is the guitar synth. That's this right here. of little spooky sound there underneath the second verse. Again, in the second verse, he brought in some more elements to kind of just build up the song a little. Again, little top end EQ, low cut filter, no compression on that whatsoever. There wasn't a lot of hardware compression used on this track in the instrumentation. It was pretty mild as far as that goes. And then the last, we have two more guitar tracks here. In the chorus, we have a guitar heavy, which is a big open, kind of a lightly broken up guitar track here. You'll hear it here. So just big open chords. Again, no compression at all, just letting the console do the compression. A little bit of top end EQ around 5K. And actually, I think I boosted a little bit of mid-range on this as well, just to kind of around 500-600 hertz, just a couple of dB just to get it to kind of cut through a little bit. And that's the bulk of the instrumentation. Before we get to the vocals, let me come down to the rest of the instrumentation. We have some keyboards and some such. So in the choruses, we have an organ here, kind of a B3 kind of a thing. Let me just solo that up. So just in the choruses. Again, no compression, just some top end EQ, that's it. In the bridge section, we have this thing called, I think it's a VST patch called amplified keys or amped keys. Brought that down to the short fader here. So let me play that back for you. So here's the keys. Basic little part. On that, I think there might be a little bit of EQ on that. Is there EQ on that one? No, not on that one. On the next two tracks there are. We got some plugins as well, I'll show you. So that doesn't have any EQ, that's the strict patch. Then we have a shaker and a tambourine that happens in the choruses. So the shaker again is coming down to another small fader, and the tambourine's coming down to a small fader as well. They're both panned about 50% left and right. And on those here in Studio One, because on the short fader, the EQ, I can't use the EQ. The EQ is dedicated to the long fader. So on the short fader, I just use a plugin in the box. So we're using the Slate Digital. I just set up the VMR, the virtual mix rack, and I just set up an SSL channel strip to kind of, mimic what we're doing here in hardware. We have the FGS, which is the Brit 4K EQ, which is the same EQ that would be here. And then we have the FG Dynamics, which is the same thing that I'd have in the rack in the 611 500 series. So our shaker, we're doing a little bit of top end EQ at 8K, and we're doing a little bit of compression. And then let's see, same thing with the tambourine, I believe. Tambourine is the same thing, a little bit more compression on the tambourine. Again, a little bit of top end at 8K, and that's really it. Just kind of blends in. It's just kind of a filler to build up the chorus a little bit. Then we have this bells track, and this bells track happens in the bridge as well. And I'll play back the whole bridge for you in a second so you can kind of hear all these things in context. But here is the bells track. So again, a little bit of top end EQ, actually 8K, I'm boosting up like 15 dB on that. And then I'm compressing about 3 dB on it, that's about it. And then the last thing we have is this effects track, which comes down to two short faders left and right, one panned hard left, one panned hard right, that's channel 37 and 38. And that's where we have some of the effects that are kind of happening in different parts of the song. So if I were to solo, we have just some simple little sound effects. I'll play it back and then we'll get to the vocals here. So here's where the first sound effects comes in. It's kind of like a staticky kind of a thing. Here we go. kind of cool, just in a little interesting part. In the bridge here, we have kind of an explosion kind of a thing. So here we go. Let me just lead up to it so you can hear it. That kind of thing. Coming out of the bridge, we have this little countdown thing. Here we go. 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's kind of a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, it's like a satellite being launched into space, one lone satellite. And then at the very end of the song, we have this kind of little thing here. You can hear it. Here's the very end.
0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a loop.
I'll back it up a little so you can hear the music into that.
0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a loop.
Pretty straightforward. Now the only thing that goes on that effects track is I got a lot of top end EQ. It was kind of dark. So again, I used the Slate Digital FGS. The EQ and just boosted a bunch of top end on it just to get it to cut through so we could hear it, so it wasn't so muffled and dark. That's all the instrumentation. Now if we go to the vocals, as I said here, the lead vocal was something that Brandon sent me finished, tuned, affected with reverb delay and everything. I'll play it back and you'll kind of hear it here. I'll solo it up here. Here we go.
Catching my signals in the night, recording every word.
So it's got quite a bit of reverb, quite a bit of delay, more than we would typically use in the song. But for this song, because it's about a satellite in outer space, kind of wanted that more of a spacey kind of thing. And Brandon was pretty specific about what he wanted. So he produced that and said, can you make something that sounds like that? And again, he gave me his dry vocal track. And after I listened to it in the track, I said, why am I going to try to copy it? It sounds good just the way it is. If he's happy with it, it fits the song perfectly, I feel, and so does he. And so hopefully will you. And so we just left it. So in the mix, it sounds like this. So it fits perfectly. On that lead vocal, I'm using the audio-scape 76A, the blue stripe on that. We're doing about 7 to 10 dB of compression. And on this particular track, I got the release kind of slowed up quite a bit. It's kind of a medium slow release because I wanted that vocal to be pulled forward. I wanted that compressor to hold on to it. We want it to sit right out in front of you just because of the type of delivery this vocal is. And I think it sounds really, really great. All the other vocals that are underneath it all came unaffected, unprocessed, all of that like you normally would. And the only thing I'm using on it is the audio-scape XL305 reverb on all the other vocal tracks, as well as all the other instrumentation with the exception of the drums, which we'll talk about in a minute. All the other instruments have a little bit of dose of this XL305. I've talked about this before. I love that unit. If you're looking for an analog reverb, a spring reverb that just sounds different, it's not a run-of-the-mill digital reverb, the XL305 is great. And usually what I use that for on most projects is, except for the drums for the most part, everything else goes through it. And I just use the auxes and just put a touch in on everything. And you don't notice that it's really there unless I take it all away, which I can do right now. So I'll just, if you look on the overhead here, it's the first unit right here, the XL305, and when the button is when this is red, it means it's not enabled, it's disabled, and then when it's not red, it's enabled. So I'll start with it and I'll just take it away. I'll just pull it in and out. You can hear it. It just gives the mix a little bit of size. It's not overwhelming. It's not drowning in reverb. The only other reverb that we have is, like I said, on the lead vocal, and that's already pre-processed. So here we go.
Never will they belong to me again. Yeah. You're only losing this fight because you refuse to see the light. Welcoming the storm with your head face down into the earth. Make exceptions.
So it's just a little bit. I really love this for that. I don't want to hear it, I want to feel it more than I hear it. I hear it just a little bit and I like it just the way it is. Now for drum reverb, I'm using the Neve AMS that's in the 500 rack over there. I have kind of a preset that I kind of use for drums for the most part. And again, it's not a ton, and I'm just using reverb on the overheads in the rooms. I'm not using any reverb on the direct mics at all. I didn't feel like it needed it, and typically reverbs on drums, that's kind of what I do more times than not, is overheads in rooms. I don't usually put it on the direct mics, sometimes the snare, but not in this particular case. So again, if I were to solo up all of the drums here, just so you can hear the effect of what that reverb will do. Again, it'll be the second unit here on the console. Again, gray unlit button means it's enabled, red button means it's muted. So we'll start with it and I'll take it away. So again, it's not adding a whole lot because the overheads in the rooms already sounded great coming out of SSD5. So I just want to add a little bit more reverb to extend that room just a little bit. Again, it's very, very subtle. You could almost take it away and you would barely notice it, but it's there like that for a reason. And yeah, we just like the way it just kind of blends in. So whenever I'm using, when I get drums that are coming out of something like Superior Drummer or SSD5 or Easy Drummer 3, a lot of times they'll have, especially in the rooms in the overhead mics, it'll have a lot of the ambience already built in and it sounds great. So there's real no reason to change it. If it sounds good, leave it alone, as I always say. And that is, I think, did I get all the tracks? That is the basic layout of all the tracks. Now let me play back the bridge section for you, just so you could hear where the effects kind of come in. You could hear the way the vocals. So I'll come out of this second chorus into the bridge, going to the outro chorus, so you can kind of hear what the bridge is doing. Here we go. So there we go. So that's the bridge into the outro chorus. You can hear some of the sound effects and how that kind of all lays into the track. Now, the only other thing I got going on as far as this is going is on my print track here, I have my master bus print track plugin. So I'm using the Universal Audio Case Stereo, which we've talked about before. I use this on every single mix to give it a little bit more ambience. It's an ambient recovery plugin, so it's adding a little bit more ambience to the entire track, but it almost acts a little bit more as a stereo widener. So that's what I'm using here. And then I'm using the Universal Audio Moog EQ4, which I really, really love. I can't wait to get this in a hardware unit. One day it's coming. I'm boosting a little bit of the sub at about 10 Hertz. I'm boosting a half a dB at 10, a half a dB at 40. I'm boosting about a dB at 650. And then I'm putting a 2.5K shelf on at about a half a dB. And then at 40K on the airband, I think I got 1 dB in there. So let me just give you what the what the Moog does. I'll turn this on and off here. Keep your eye on the screen.
Catching my signals in the night, recording every word. Never will they belong to me again.
So it just gives that real nice tight focus low end, and then a little bit more air on the top, which I really like. And then from there, we're going to the Slate Digital Virtual Tape Machine. Again, a standard thing for me. Again, it gives a little bit of bump on the low end. We're doing a little bit of low end bump throughout this whole mix. A little bit on the EQ, on the kick, a little bit on the 5500, a little bit on the Moog, a little bit on the tape machine, which really, as it starts to build, it sounds really great. And then last but not least, in the choruses, I automated the Ozone Imager, so the top two bands just kind of come on in the chorus and kind of open up the mix just a little bit. No big deal. I'll play this back and I'll take it away and you can hear what it does.
Let me find a way to make you want it. Let me find a way to make you see. Let me find a place where we first started. Let me find a way. Let me find a way, yeah.
So it just opens up the mix just a little bit more. And that is it. That is it. That's the whole mix. So it's, again, a pretty tricky mix because there's a lot of little things happening here. Not an overly complex mix, but a lot of little moving parts. The one thing I will say, I spent a lot of time really listening to this one on the boombox up there, which is where I did about probably 30 or 40% of the mixing on. Listening to that, because I wanted to make sure that all these little things that we got going on and popping up in different sections of the song really cut through on the smaller speakers. That kind of replicates what earbuds are going to sound like, crappy little headphones, crappy car stereo system, to make sure that we're not going to get a lot of low end out of that, but to make sure we're hearing the slap of the kick drum, to make sure we're hearing a little bit of the upper frequencies of the bass, and most importantly, everything is kind of balanced and nothing is really sticking out too much. And when these new elements are flying into the mix in different parts of the song, that it blends nice. When you're listening to this on just the vocals and the sub, sometimes things could be poking out and you don't really realize it because this system sounds so beautiful, has a really nice way of smoothing out the top end and kind of making everything feel like it's really balanced. So one of the things that I like to do, especially on kind of a little bit of a busy mix, is use that boombox. And I must have had that on probably, I'd say 40% of the mix. I was mixing through that to make sure that the balance was right, and then checking it on headphones, and when I brought it back to the vocals, it just sounded great. And Brandon's really happy with it, and that's all that really matters, right? The client is happy. So that's a little inside look at One Lone Satellite by Brandon Van Allen. Again, go out to his website, check out his music. We're gonna be doing more of his mixes in the future, for sure. And we have other mixes we're gonna do by some other artists, different styles of music. Brandon's kind of in that pop rock kind of a thing. We're gonna do a little bit more heavy rock. We're gonna do maybe some country and some other music coming up in the very near future. So let me know what you think of this series below. If you like this Inside the Mix series, leave some comments below. Let me know what you think. Once again, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Go out to mixingmusicanalog.com because I'm going to be having some training courses available to you if you want to know how we mix in the analog hybrid workflow, as well as you can check out all the things I have going on over there with my mixing and mastering services. So until the next video, I've been Dave with Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com. Thank you so very much for watching me today, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Inside the Mix. Take care, everybody.